Ladies and gentlemen, a storm is quietly brewing across the Pacific. A storm that threatens to reshape everything we know about the global economy. And when it hits, its impact will be felt around the world in ways we may not be prepared for. Imagine a world where the things you rely on every day, the smartphone in your pocket, the solar panels on your roof, suddenly skyrocket in price, or worse, disappear entirely. It's no longer a distant possibility, a mere hypothetical. It's a reality that may be closer than we think. Recent reports have sent shockwaves through the global community. China, the manufacturing giant that has long fueled the world's economy, is tightening its grip on exports to the United States. The question now isn't if this will disrupt global trade, it's how deeply and how soon. This raises an urgent question that we cannot afford to ignore. Will China's assertive moves force smaller nations to reconsider their reliance on a U.S.-led trade system? Could this mark the end of the era where the U.S. economy has held the reins of global trade dominance? For decades, the global economic order has revolved around the U.S.-centric model. But now, China's aggressive steps toward economic independence are shifting the balance of power in ways no one expected. In a stunning revelation from Bloomberg, U.S. imports of Chinese goods plummeted by 20% just last year, suggesting that a deliberate decoupling is already well underway. Meanwhile, trade between China and emerging markets like Brazil, India, and ASEAN nations isn't just surviving, it's thriving. Here's the question that could define the future of global trade. Is this the tipping point where the U.S. loses its grip on economic leadership? In 2023 alone, China's trade with the BRICS nations surged by 30%, signaling a seismic shift toward a new economic order, one that is no longer dominated by the U.S. This isn't just a passing trend, it's a transformation that could irrevocably alter global power dynamics in ways we've never seen before. But there's more to this than just trade numbers. Let's talk about something far more critical: rare earth minerals. Over 90% of the world's rare earths, essential for everything from semiconductors to military technology, are processed in China. Back in 2021, a White House report flagged the U.S.'s reliance on Chinese rare earths as a national security risk. Yet, despite the warning, no meaningful steps have been taken to mitigate this dependency. The U.S. is staring down the barrel of crippling shortages in industries that rely on Chinese components: automotive manufacturing, renewable energy, and tech. Picture this: the U.S. produces just 12% of the world's semiconductors, while China controls over 50% of the entire supply chain. Can America's tech giants survive such a devastating blow? Geopolitical strategist Peter Jean warns, China's export control mechanisms are a direct challenge to the complacency of Western supply chains. Catastrophic. And the clock is ticking. According to McKinsey, rebuilding a self-sufficient semiconductor industry in the U.S. could cost upwards of $1 trillion and take over a decade. Can the U.S. afford such a monumental task? Or will it be forced to make painful compromises that threaten its geopolitical influence? Almost everything you own, your TV, your kitchen appliances, your laptop, has a Made in China label. What happens when these goods become either unaffordable or unavailable? Already, a survey from the Consumer Technology Association reveals that 70% of electronics sold in the U.S. come from China. And Americans are already feeling the effects. The Wall Street Journal reports a 15% price hike in electronics due to ongoing trade tensions. Now imagine this: a full halt on exports, a complete collapse of the supply chain. How quickly can U.S. manufacturers ramp up production to meet the demand? The cost to American households could be staggering. According to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, the average American family could face an additional $22,000 in annual expenses if tariffs and How long will the public stand for this? And when will growing discontent lead to a political reckoning? Meanwhile, China has been quietly strengthening its trade ties with emerging economies through initiatives like the Belt and Road. Brazil, South Africa, and Saudi Arabia are increasingly aligning themselves with Beijing, signaling that they no longer need to rely on a U.S.-dominated economic system. Take India's recent decision to settle trade with Russia in rupees, not dollars. It's just one example of how countries are exploring alternative payment systems to reduce their reliance on Western financial institutions. This could be the opening of a door to new, more equitable global alliances, or it could further fracture an already divided world economy. The rise of multipolar trade blocs is already underway. The BRICS nations now account for over 31% of global GDP, surpassing the G7. According to a Financial Times report in early 2024, the U.S.-centric economic order is already beginning to crack. Could this be the dawn of a new global economic architecture? One where the U.S. no longer calls the shots? The winds of change are picking up and they're growing stronger by the day. The question is, are we ready for the storm that's about to hit? Washington has long railed against its trade deficits with China, citing both a crippling economic imbalance and national security threats. But here's the bitter irony. The very policies designed to correct these imbalances may be making them worse. The U.S. has restricted exports that could have helped mitigate the very deficits it so loudly condemns. Take the ban on advanced semiconductor exports to China, for instance. Ostensibly meant to curb Beijing's technological progress, it has in fact only exacerbated the trade gap. Economist Jeffrey Sachs pulls no punches, declaring, restricting exports while demanding balanced trade is like trying to plug one hole in a sinking ship, only to create another. And the situation only grows more perilous. Despite a sharp drop in imports, U.S. exports of agricultural goods like soybeans and wheat surged by 25% in 2023, painting an even more perplexing picture.
The underlying truth becomes undeniable. The U.S. and China are inextricably linked, and even the harshest policies can't sever that bond. But there's a darker side to this conflict. Some analysts argue that U.S. policies go beyond national security. They are about maintaining a stranglehold on global dominance. However, China's technological strides, from AI to quantum computing, are now directly challenging that very dominance. A report from the Carnegie Endowment warns that these containment policies could backfire spectacularly, accelerating China's self-sufficiency and innovation. The more the U.S. isolates China, the faster China evolves. China's advances in 7-nanometer chip manufacturing, made even more impressive by the face of U.S. sanctions, serve as chilling evidence of Beijing's resilience. And that raises an ominous question: is the U.S. trying to contain China, or is it inadvertently fueling China's meteoric rise? Looking back in history, we've seen this scenario play out before. Recall the 1980s, when tariffs and trade restrictions were slapped on Japanese automakers to protect U.S. industries. While these measures provided temporary relief, they also forced Japan's companies to innovate. Today, Toyota and Honda are global powerhouses, dominating a significant portion of the market. Could the same thing happen with China? Historian Graham Allison's warning echoes louder than ever. If history teaches us anything, it's that economic containment often produces unintended consequences. As financial sanctions, one of the U.S.'s key foreign policy tools, drive nations toward seeking alternatives, China is deepening ties with countries like Russia and Brazil. The BRICS bloc is even exploring the creation of a new reserve currency. Meanwhile, the U.S. dollar, once the unrivaled champion of global reserves, has seen its share tumble from 71% in 1999 to 58% in 2023. This decline could signal the beginning of the end for dollar dominance. If the dollar loses its preeminent role, the U.S. will find itself struggling to impose its will on the world.
As economist Eswar Prasad warns, a shift away from the dollar could unleash chaos in global markets, destabilizing economies and triggering decades of inflationary pressure. The U.S., once the global beacon of free trade and open markets, now stands in stark contrast to its past. Actions like imposing tariffs and blacklisting Chinese firms betray this reality. Former Singaporean diplomat Kishore Mahbubani put it bluntly, the so-called rules-based order is crumbling under the weight of its contradictions. Emerging powers are demanding fairness, reciprocity, and mutual respect, challenging the U.S. to live up to its own ideals. The big question looming on the horizon: is the world heading toward a multipolar system where no single nation reigns supreme? And if that's the case, what role will the U.S. play in this new global landscape? The challenges are immense, but crises often bring forth opportunities. Could this be the moment for the U.S. to reimagine its future, investing in infrastructure, reviving domestic manufacturing, and fostering innovation? The U.S. still possesses the resources, talent, and ingenuity to rebuild its industrial base, but it will require a profound shift in mindset, from obstruction to construction. Programs like the CHIPS Act, allocating $52 billion to boost semiconductor manufacturing, are a step in the right direction, but more comprehensive and visionary policies are needed to ensure long-term resilience and competitiveness. As this defining moment unfolds, one thing is clear: this is no ordinary trade disruption. It is a moment of reckoning for the U.S. and the global economy. Will this crisis signal the collapse of the U.S.-centric order, or will it spark a resurgence of American strength? The future hangs in the balance. The decisions made today will determine whether history repeats itself, or whether a new, more resilient chapter begins. But the question remains: are policymakers truly prepared to face the storm, or will they let history repeat itself yet again? Thank you for watching. If you find these developments as gripping as we do, don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out the next video. Now live on your